from New York. Sherwin, thanks very much for joining us. I get a sense and a feeling that this speech could change the course of history. Is that being a bit dramatic?
Well, I don't know if it will so much change the course of history. I think what you will see is probably a violent reaction on the streets, particularly in the Middle East, in response to this. But, you know, off air, Peter, you and I were talking about whether the president will in fact do as his officials, his White House officials have said he will do. And in a year where up is down and where left is right, it's difficult to really speculate as to what exactly will come out of the United States president's mouth later, in about 30 minutes from now. But what we can tell you is that officials have confirmed that he is going to announce that the United States Embassy will move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and that the United States will be recognizing Jerusalem as the only capital of Israel. And what the U.S. officials, White House officials are saying is that all the president is really doing is enacting United States law. Many South Africans and many people around the world won't know that in 1995, the Jerusalem Embassy Act was passed by large majorities in both the House and in the Senate. So essentially, there is a law in the United States that says the embassy must move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. What this does do is flout international law. There are several Security Council resolutions, the first one passed in 1980, that does not recognize Jerusalem as the united capital of Israel. As you will know, that after the 1967 war, when Israeli troops annexed East Jerusalem, ever since then this has been a disputed issue, and the United Nations regards the question of East Jerusalem, which Palestinians claim as the future capital of a Palestinian state, as a final status issue that must be negotiated in direct negotiations. So that, I think, really does lay it out as to where we are today.
Do we have any idea what's motivating Donald Trump to do this? I mean, you know, it doesn't have to happen today. He could take his time, and this is like within the first sort of year of his presidency. Is he trying to get a huge win for the Jewish lobby in the U.S.? Do we have any idea why he's almost bent on going down this road?
I saw an interesting statistic a few moments ago, Peter, that 70% of Jewish people in the United States voted for Hillary Clinton. So it doesn't make sense to say that this is because of the Jewish lobby. I think this speaks more to his evangelical base that voted for him in large majority in the last election. And this was, as we all know, a campaign promise of President Donald Trump, much like withdrawing from the Paris Climate Change Agreement was a campaign promise. And I think what this does, it further isolates the United States on the international stage. You've mentioned the criticism that has emanated from Arab leaders, the Palestinian leadership. The European Union has called on the United States to do nothing that will undermine the prospects of a return first to negotiations, and of course the final goal of a two-state solution. We've heard similar rhetoric from the spokesperson of the Secretary General, and I must add that just when Donald Trump finishes at the White House regarding this issue, we will be hearing from the Secretary General of the United Nations on the prospects for peace in the Middle East. So this is very much a topical issue here. It is a long-standing issue on the Security Council agenda, and I think the United States will once again, under the leadership of Donald Trump, be isolating itself on the international stage.
All right, so you've mentioned the United Nations, and we can see that towering building behind you. What's the buzz about countries outside of the Middle East? What sense do you get when you walk around the UN about this particular issue?
The ambassador of Bolivia walked into the Security Council earlier on another issue and told us that they will call for an urgent meeting of the Security Council if, in fact, President Donald Trump goes ahead and makes this announcement. Quote, they called it a reckless and dangerous decision that goes against international law. And when we talk about international law, we are talking about those 7 or 8 Security Council resolutions that condemn the annexation by Israel of East Jerusalem, which is a final status issue. But also, in terms of the Jerusalem Embassy Act, which I mentioned, really you have domestic law in the United States in complete opposition to international law. And let's not forget that the United States is still a member of the United Nations, and so therefore must comply with international law. So this is a very grey area in terms of what they can do domestically and what their obligations are in terms of what the United Nations would like to see.
All right, Sherwin, we're going to leave it there for the time being, but hopefully we'll catch up with you a little bit later in the aftermath of that speech. That's Sherwin Bryce-Pease, our correspondent in New York at this time. Well, let's shift focus and move not too far away from there to the nation's capital. Kate Fisher is standing by with